Today we're going to go over the Yuan points. So the Yuan points are the points that help with what? Charge the organ's battery. That's what it is. So that's why I call it the organ's battery charger, or the Mingmen of the organ. So it strengthens its roots. That's what it really does, the Yuan points. So for example, lung 9, right, the point in itself, if you needle right here, it charges this organ, the lung organ, its battery, or the Mingmen of the organ, because we always say that there's a Mingmen of the body as well, right? It is the root chakra at the bottom of our body, right? It strengthens its roots. That's essentially what it does. So we know that there's 12 primary channels, and there's 12 Yuan points. So we'll go with the first one. As I just said, lung 9 is the Yuan point for the lung. It's the radial end of the transverse wrist crease. Radial, I always say, is right by where the thumb area is, right? Lateral side of the radial artery. So this is a landmark point. Radial artery usually always goes with the lungs, okay? It's always pointed out. Happens to be on this side, right? No coincidence. Radial end of the transverse wrist crease. Lateral side of the radial artery, okay? The Yuan point for the LI is LI4. It is on the dorsum of the hand, dorsum, between the first and the second metacarpal bone. First and second metacarpal bone, mid of the second metacarpal bone on the radial side. So it's the midpoint of the second metacarpal bone, but it's on the radial side. So radial side, where the thumb area is, right? So that would be LI4. For the stomach, it's stomach 42 for the Yuan point. It's on the dorsum, between second and third metatarsal bone. Second and third metatarsal bones, between here and cuneiform bone. The bone right here. So it's in between the second and third, right? And the cuneiform bone. So that's how you would find stomach 42. And then we have spleen 3. Spleen 3 is the Yuan point for the spleen. It's proximal and inferior to the head of the first metatarsal bone, red and white skin. This red and white skin part is always used very frequently, especially when we are associating with the area around, like the palms of the hand or the feet. This is always used quite often in description. But it's the first metatarsal bone. First metatarsal bone is the big toe, right? The big toe, right? That's the bone we're talking about. So it's proximal inferior to the head of that bone, and that's spleen 3. It's pretty much the toe, and there's like a little bump right underneath that, and underneath that bone, right, that flesh where it's red and white, if you can visualize it, that's where spleen 3 is. And then the Yuan point for the heart is heart 7. It's on the ulnar end of the transverse crease. Ulnar is on the pinky side, right? Ulnar end of the transverse crease. So you see how the lung is here on the radial side, and then radial end, how this is the ulnar end. Radial side of the tender flexor carpi ulnaris. I told you, when we talk about flexor carpi ulnaris, it's always associated with the heart. Okay, so it's on the radial side of this tendon, flexor carpi ulnaris, and that's where heart 7 is. So pretty much the two Yuans, the lung and the heart, they're parallel to each other. Okay, and they're lateral to each other. We have SI4, which would be the Yuan point for the SI. It's on the ulnar side of the palm between the base of the fifth metacarpal bone and tracheal, tra, tra, sorry, triquetral bone. So when we say ulnar side of the palm, it's where the pinky side is, right? And it's between that base of the fifth metacarpal bone, which is right here, and the triquetral bone. This is a landmark name. You should probably remember this one. And then we have UB62 as the Yuan point. It's directly below and lateral to the malleolus. So we know where the lateral malleolus is, right? It's directly below, right here. If you actually feel the lateral side, the bottom of the lateral malleolus, there should be a small space, and that's UB62, and that's the Yuan point for UB. The Yuan point for the kidney is kidney 3. It's kind of similar to spleen 3, you know? Between the medial malleolus and tendinocalcaneus. Level with tip of medial malleolus. So you find the medial malleolus. The tip is somewhere around the center, right? And it's level with that. So you keep that in mind. But it's between the medial malleolus, which is right here, right? And the tendon. Calcaneus. Tendocalcaneus. Right here. So that's how you know it's between this, and that would be kidney 3. And now for the Yuan for the PC is PC7. It's between the transverse wrist crease of the palmaris longus and flexor carpi radialis. As I say again, radialis associated always with the PC. It's between the transverse wrist crease. So transverse wrist crease right here of the palmaris longus, right here, and flexor carpi radialis right here. So that's how you know. In between those two, right? Right at the transverse wrist crease, that's where PC7 would be. Sanjiao 4 is the Yuan point for the Sanjiao. It's on the dorsum, right? Of the transverse wrist crease. It's also on the wrist crease, right? Lateral to extensor digitorum communis. This is a landmark. You should get this memorized. So you see right here, extensor digitorum communis, right here. Yeah, it's on the dorsum of the transverse wrist crease, and it's lateral to it. So that's how you know it's right here. And that would be Sanjiao 4. Now Yuan for the GB is the GB40. It's kind of like UB, okay? Anterior and inferior to the external malleolus. See? This is the lateral malleolus, okay? It's anterior to the front and inferior. For the UB, it was pretty much right below, right? Here it's anterior inferior. Kind of similar language when you're looking for GB34. It also says anterior inferior. But here it says anterior inferior to the external malleolus, or the lateral malleolus, okay? Lateral to the extensor digitorum longus. So it's saying this is actually lateral to it. And this is extensor digitorum longus right here. You see right here? So it's saying it's lateral to that. So it matches like that. This you should get memorized. Extensor digitorum longus. And then now we have the Yuan point is liver 3. This is kind of like, you know, do you see spleen, kidney, liver, all are what? 3. Okay? And when you check about, you know, GB40, and even like UB62, they're kind of similar. They happen to be at the malleolus. And guess what? The PC, the Sanja, they're all the transverse wrist crease, whether that's your palm up or palm down, right? This one too. It's kind of right at that point. This one as well. The only thing is this one is a little bit different, stomach. But the lung is also the same. I think it's at the webs, right? Between the bones. So that would be like LI4, stomach 42. Those are more of the points like that. But when it comes to like, spleen 3, kidney 3, and then we also have liver 3, this is not a coincidence. So if you make that association where all the Yuan points are visually, you have to know the numbers as in terms of, which one it is, right? But if you remember the picture of like where it is, the Yuan source points, then it's easier for you to memorize. You can recall it. You'd be like, what's that point? Yuan points are right by the lateral, by the malleolus. UB is on the, lateral side too. And so is GB. I forget where it quite was, but it was somewhere right below that, lateral malleolus. And then you can kind of work yourself backwards if you happen to forget in the exam. Because sometimes people tell me when they get onto the exams, they're all numbers. And then they get confused. Sometimes also pressure makes you also forget too. So this is a good way to remember that for that purpose. So for the Yuan, it would be liver 3. It's in the dorsum of the dorsum of the foot, distal to the junction of the first and second metatarsal. See, this is again, dorsum of the foot. It's around the web, right, of the two bones. Junction of the first and second metatarsal, see? So there's a commonality when it comes to where the location of the Yuan point is. If you look through the slides very carefully, you can make that mental association and easily memorize the Yuan source points. I hope that was helpful.